I'm so thrilled to have you all here to talk about this film. As you know, an admirer of James's work and a fan of every film that Lily has ever been in. I think this is your first film, I think, right?
Second.
Oh, second. Sorry. So I guess I have some catching up to do. My mistake.
Palm Trees and Power Lines by Jamie Dack.
Oh.
Her first film.
Well,
Yeah, that's the one.
I think I just adore this film, and I have questions for all of you. But I want to start with the writing process. And I think it's an unusual film in that it's both very talky and also very much existing within spaces of silence and spaces of sort of nonverbal expression, communication. And the dialogue feels lived in a way that I think I can only imagine it's hard to capture the particular rhythms of conversation between a trio that's composed the way this trio is, a father and his old buddy and this teen daughter, and there's the absent son who's not with the group. It was that sort of has its own contribution to that dynamic. So India, could you just talk about how you arrived at this premise and how you built it out through dialogue and gave shape to that dialogue to result in kind of the dramatic arc that ends up being quite structured?
Let's see. I grew up spending a lot of time when I was with my dad with him and his male friends, and have memories of observing that dynamic, and as a young girl, various ages, feeling a certain way, kind of playing a role in that or not playing a role, but I often felt like an observer. So that memory was kind of the kernel concept for the film. I love writing dialogue. I love characters that talk a lot. And so I really wrote it in a kind of intuitive way without really much knowledge of what was going to happen in the story, but a very clear knowledge of who these three people were. And I feel corny every time I say this, but I think I just kind of let them talk to each other a lot and really overwrote a script. It was much longer, and then found the structure in going back through it. And my idea was always to have a lot of the dialogue play off screen over the listener and the observer. But also just so much of it is in the performance and the actors and their chemistry and dynamic and what they bring to it. So, I mean, that's most of what happens.
What were you looking for in your cast? And what, I know there's a great story as to how you and Lily connected, but I'm also curious as to what you were looking for in the character of Chris, in the sort of way in which, did you set out to cast these two leads together or in dialogue with each other somehow, or was it two separate discoveries?
I think all in dialogue with each other. I mean, I knew that this duo had to feel like a family, and we cast Lily first. We'd been kind of casting in maybe a more traditional way and not quite finding the right Sam. And then I have a younger sister who's, she was 18 at the time, and I asked her randomly if she knew any actors. And you want to tell the story?
Go for it. Well, after that, we met up for coffee and we just talked about art for a couple hours, and then you asked me to tape.
And her audition was so good. It was, and I sort of I loved it, but I didn't really trust my instincts. I was like, I adore her. We really connected in person, but I sent it to our casting director, Taylor Williams, and she called me immediately and I didn't give any context or anything, but she called me immediately, and she was like, "What? Where did this come from?" So it was very unanimous, yeah. And then I'm longtime fan of James. Just make him sit in that for a moment. Yeah, longtime fan of James, and yeah, I mean, I think the first time the three of us had a conversation, I just sort of observed their dynamic, and they just had a really easy, natural chemistry that I think comes through in the movie. But yeah, and then Danny, I had seen him in an Annie Baker play, and his back was to me where I was sitting throughout most of the play. Has this really beautiful monologue where he's just a very, sort of emotional, beautiful, vulnerable moment in the play The Antipodes, and I had remembered it ever since. And I really, with that character, I knew it was a tricky thing to pull off. I really wanted somebody who could, communicate those more vulnerable moments. I mean, yeah, doing a lot of tricky things, but.
There's something that felt so true to me about the relationship between Sam and Chris, and that James and Lily, there's like a lived-in quality to this relationship. I feel as though I know these characters, and that they really are a father and a daughter who maybe don't live together, and maybe have, maybe are relearning how to relate to each other as she's entering adulthood. How did you two approach that dynamic specifically, and sort of drawing out that chemistry within your respective performances?
We both talk a lot, so we found things to talk about pretty early on, and we had a lot of Zooms. We never talked about the script, really.
No, I don't think once.
Yeah, we just talk about art
We just
and
talked
books.
about life and art and things that we were interested in.
Yeah. He sounds really excited to do. I guess the Zooms didn't go that well. But no, I think our dynamic kind of.
In spite of itself, it somehow worked out.
Yeah. See, it works a little bit.
I mean, yeah, it's who they are. I don't know, something.
Do you think that you brought to bear on the roles your own relationships with your own family members? Do you think your performances were informed by dynamics that are familiar to you, or being a teenager with parents?
I am also a daughter to a father, so that was something. What about you? You're a father.
I don't
not
have
to
any
a
daughters.
daughter.
I have sons, but I think you always draw from whatever your firsthand experiences or observations. But honestly, it all came out of the script, and then it's just when you're working with great actors, life's easy.
I wanted to ask particularly about the role that empathy plays in the film, both within the film, but also within the telling, because I think Sam's perspective is so central and so strong and so vivid, but the characters of Chris and Matt are are also given the time and the space to be full people. You and I were talking about this a bit, India, and the sort of way in which, by the end of the film, the viewer has come to see Matt certainly in a different light, and the relationship between Sam and Chris in a different light. And I think it all hinges on this ability to have compassion, have empathy, have an awareness of another person's personhood. And so, India, was this sort of an explicit theme that you were thinking in terms of in building this story, or did it sort of just emerge from your practice?
Yeah, I think it was explicit. I mean, I love both of those characters. Like, I love both of those men, and tried to approach the writing of them from that perspective, and I really want the audience to as well, but you can feel however you want to feel about them, but yeah, I love them. And part of putting the kind of campfire scene so late in the movie, for me, that was about kind of giving us the time to get to know them and learn more about them and their dynamic and their past, and and also have the moment happen at the tail end of a long scene where Matt has revealed a lot about himself. So I think the empathy came maybe structurally also.
There's a really delicate sort of dance that the film is doing between registers. It's a very funny movie, and I caught some laughter in this screening. But it's also really hinges on discomfort and sort of the awkwardness of these relationships. And of course, at the end, there's a really the ending is very sobering, and it's a moment of sort of realization or new clarity, I think, for the characters. How did you both, as the director who's sort of setting the tone and creating this atmosphere, this mood, and also on the level of performance, how did you approach this sort of constantly shifting, fluid mood or vibe that the film is playing with?
Look at me.
You have the answer, James? For me, it really was discovered in the edit. Graham Mason, who edited the film and also produced it, was very, we were talking about the themes of the movie and throughout, but the subtleties of the edit, I think, are where the kind of discomfort and the release of that discomfort was found. How long you stay on something and who you're choosing to highlight in that moment, I feel like is where it was sort of came together for me. But from a performance place, what do you think?
Like, where did I find the discomfort?
Well, I think, in your performance in particular, Lily, I think you, as a teen would do, you're just sort of moving between moods and between sort of attitudes or feelings about the people you're with. And you just, I'm just curious if you had an approach to that kind of responsiveness.
Yeah. Well, I think there's moments where Sam tries to speak up for herself, and she doesn't like to talk a lot, and the moments that she does, it's something significant. So I'm always looking at the lines and seeing where it's coming from. But in moments where she's asking if those 3 hiker boys are going to be staying with us, it's things like that where it's she's scared to speak up for herself, but she's saying something. I'm making sure I'm listening to it and feeling the discomfort with her.
I have more questions, but I want to open it up to the audience and see if there's any audience questions. We have a mic that will come around if you want to raise your hand. I see a hand all the way in the back there. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the movie. I have one basic question. I think you just check all the shots in the nature. How hard to put cameras there? What was the logistics about it? And did you have anything with the you use lights or anything, or it's just natural, right?
We were a very lean, small crew, so everything was quite minimal. But yeah, a lot of natural light, but yeah, some lights here and there. But Wilson Cameron, our DP and also producer on the movie, and I had worked together many times before, and I think a lot of the look of the film was a product of years of collaboration and developing a kind of shared film language and being adaptable to the environment and the challenges of shooting outdoors and yeah, just being able to move quickly and pivot when we were thrown some challenge.
I want to actually push on that a little more. Can you talk about the sort of contingencies of the shoot and how it was? I know it was a very short shoot and very determined by the environment in which you were working. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, we shot the movie in 12 days.
Not
but
really.
James pointed out
No,
that
not really. No, we didn't.
we lost.
We lost almost a full day.
Yeah,
so we really shot it in 11
days. I mean, it was. We did a lot of planning, but also just a lot of luck. You know, the fact that we only had one rainy day and only lost one day, I think, was, you know, luck. A miracle. But also just, you know, cutting stuff that ultimately didn't need to be shot, you know, being just kind of brutal about what were the essentials to get the movie when we lost time.
What were you looking for in locations in the
Trees.
was that yeah.
Trees and water. Yeah, trees. I'd written the confrontation scene between Chris and Sam to happen at some kind of like water swimming, kind of a water feature. And then we were scouting Minnewaska State Park, where we shot one day, and the park ranger told us to call this woman Karen, who had 300 acres in the area surrounded by the Mohonk Preserve, and called Karen, scouted her property. We ended up going back there several times, but just, I mean, the waterfall that's in that movie is on her property and kind of like carries us down into the pools that end the movie. And when I saw both of those things, I was like, oh, wow, this is, yeah, some version of what I imagined. Other than that, just we needed woods.
Well, I unfortunately did get the signal that we're out of time because it's a tight turnaround, but I want to thank you all for joining us, and thank you three especially.
Thank you.